Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor of his apartment, cardboard boxes yawning open around him. The room was quiet but not empty. Shadows stretched long against the walls, caught in the weak afternoon light. Dust floated in the air, stirred by the slow work of his hands. He picked up an old hardcover book, its spine softened by time, and ran his fingers over the cover. A name was scrawled inside in fading ink. He hadn't thought of her in years. The book had been hers. Now, all these years later, he traced her handwriting with his thumb, as if touching it could bring her back for a moment. The apartment had grown small over time. He had filled it with things, books, records, papers he never sorted through. Layers of a life that had settled in place, undisturbed. Moving meant peeling it back, piece by piece, and holding each fragment up to the light. He set the book aside and reached into another box, pulling out an old photograph. A younger version of himself stared back, arms draped around a group of friends whose names he could almost remember. They had stood on a beach that day, the sky stretching wide behind them. He tried to recall what they had been laughing about, but only the image remained. Smiling faces, a frozen moment. He turned it over. No date, no notes, just a memory with no anchor. The next item he picked up was heavier. A wooden watchbox, the lid worn from years of use. He flipped it open and found the silver watch inside, its face still and silent. A gift from his father. The last thing his father had given him before the hospital visits started. Before the silence grew between them, not out of anger but inevitability. He had never been good with words, and neither had his father. Their conversations had been built from shared spaces, long drives, quiet meals. When words failed, time had done the rest. Daniel slipped the watch onto his wrist. It felt unfamiliar, heavier than he remembered. He had meant to get it fixed for years, but life had a way of letting small things slip through the cracks. He leaned back, staring at the half-packed boxes. The new city would be different. He told himself that. A fresh start, fewer ghosts. But he wondered if ghosts traveled light, slipping between the folds of old letters and forgotten trinkets, waiting to be unpacked again. His fingers brushed against a stack of postcards at the bottom of a drawer. Some were from places he had visited, some from places he had meant to go. He flipped through them slowly, lingering on one from Rome. The handwriting was unfamiliar now. His own, but younger, bold, certain. One day it said. He exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. He had never made it to Rome. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He stood, stretching his stiff legs, and opened it to find his neighbor, an elderly woman whose name he always forgot. She peered past him into the apartment, eyes settling on the half-packed boxes. Finally leaving, she asked. He nodded. She glanced at his wrist. That watch looks good on you. He looked down, surprised that he had kept it on. Thanks, he said, and for a moment he thought about telling her the story behind it, but he didn't. Some things stayed in the past, even when they traveled with you. She nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement, then shuffled away down the hall. He closed the door and turned back to the mess of his life spread out before him. The weight of it pressed against his chest, but he kept moving, sifting, sorting. Some things would stay, some things would go, and somewhere in between, he would find room for whatever came next. In the back of an old drawer, his fingers brushed against something brittle. He pulled out a yellowed envelope, its paper thin with age. His own handwriting stretched across the front. The sight of it sent a pulse of recognition through him. Emily Harp. He had not spoken her name in years, but here it was, waiting for him like a relic of another life. He knew what was inside before he even unfolded the flap. A letter, a love letter, one he had written decades ago but never sent. He had tucked it away, meaning to deliver it later, waiting for the right moment. That moment had never come. He eased the letter from its envelope, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. He read them slowly, as if they belonged to someone else. He had told her everything, how he had loved her, how he had been too afraid to say it out loud, how he had imagined their life together, the places they would go, the future he saw so clearly in the quiet spaces between them. He had promised to tell her soon. He had promised himself that, but life had moved on, as it always did. She had married someone else. He had let her go, or at least convinced himself he had. Yet here it was, proof that a part of him had been left behind, trapped in ink and paper, waiting to be found. Daniel folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. He stared at it for a long time before setting it aside. Some things could not be changed. Some letters would never be sent. He turned back to the open boxes, exhaling slowly. The past had its weight, but so did the present, and there was still more to pack. 20 years ago, the air had been thick with late summer. The kind that clung to skin and made every movement feel slow, deliberate. Daniel and Emily sat on the steps of her apartment, the street lamp above them humming like a distant memory waiting to fade. She was leaving in 2 days. London, a job she had dreamed of since college, a career she had built piece by piece, one late night, one early morning at a time. She should have been ecstatic, and maybe she was. But that night, her fingers toyed with the hem of her dress, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to map it to memory. "Your visit," she said, though it wasn't a question. Daniel nodded, but something in his chest clenched. Visit, the word felt weak, temporary, like an afterthought to something that was already ending. Emily exhaled, watching him the way she always did, like she was waiting for him to say something, to reach for something. "I could come with you," he wanted to say. The words swelled in his throat, but pride and fear crushed them before they could surface. He had spent weeks convincing himself that following her would make him weak, that if he gave up his job, his city, the life he had built, he would become someone unrecognizable. Instead, he forced a smile, hoping she couldn't see through it. "Yeah, I'll visit," she nodded, but her fingers curled into her lap. He could see the disappointment flicker across her face, so quick it might have been imagined. Or maybe she had been expecting it all along. The letter sat on his desk that night, a confession folded neatly inside a yellowed envelope. He had written it days ago, telling her what his lips refused to say, that he loved her more than his fear of losing himself, that he wanted to go with her to find a new life together, but he hadn't given it to her. Instead, he had hesitated, let the weight of uncertainty press down on him until the moment passed. The taxi came. She kissed him goodbye with a lingering softness that felt like a door closing, and then she was gone. She had left thinking he had moved on, that maybe he hadn't loved her enough to follow. And now, 2 decades later, he sat alone in a quiet apartment, staring at the letter that had never been sent. The apartment was quiet except for the soft rustling of paper. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, the yellowed envelope trembling in his hands. He slid the letter out carefully, unfolding it with the same hesitation he had felt decades ago. The ink had faded, but the words were still there, untouched by time. His own handwriting, clumsy, hurried, as if he had been racing against his own doubts. His throat tightened as he began to read. "Emily, I don't know why I'm writing this instead of saying it to your face. Maybe because I'm afraid I'll mess it up. Maybe because I'm afraid you'll hear the hesitation in my voice and think it means I don't love you enough. But I do. More than my fear, more than my doubts, more than this life I thought I needed to hold on to. I want to go with you. I don't care about the job. I don't care about the city. I just care about you. Tell me I haven't waited too long to say this." His voice cracked on the last line. He closed his eyes, inhaling sharply. It felt like stepping into a version of himself he barely recognized. One that had wanted so badly to be brave, but hadn't been. He imagined the moment playing out differently. Handing her the letter before she left, watching her read it with that slow, careful expression she always had when something mattered. Maybe she would have smiled. Maybe she would have cried. Maybe she would have reached for him, fingers curling around his, like they always had when she needed him close. Maybe they would have started a life together in London, waking up to rain-streaked windows and the hum of the city outside. Maybe they would have built something, piece by piece, the way she had built her dreams. But he hadn't sent it, and because of that, he would never know. The regret pressed against his ribs like something physical, something sharp. He let the letter slip from his fingers, watched it flutter to the floor. A part of him wanted to laugh at the cruel simplicity of it. 20 years of wondering, all resting on a single choice he hadn't been brave enough to make. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. Inside, Daniel sat alone, staring at the past he could never change. The screen glowed in the dim apartment, casting a pale light across Daniel's hands. He had typed her name before he could talk himself out of it. Emily Hart. It felt strange to see it after so many years, her face appearing on the screen as if she had been waiting there all along. Her profile was public. Not much, just glimpses. A photo by the Thames, her hair wind-tousled, a glass of wine in her hand, a bookstore with shelves stretching to the ceiling, a quiet corner of a cafe, a novel resting beside a half-finished espresso. She looked the same, but different. Older, yes, but not in a way that made time feel cruel, just fuller, a life lived. She was still in Europe, maybe still in London, and she looked happy. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could he even say? "Hey, it's been 20 years, and I found a letter I never sent you." Instead, he typed carefully. "Emily, I don't know if you'd even want to hear from me after all this time, but I came across something today that made me think of you. I hope you're well. Simple, non-committal, a way to open a door without stepping through it. The cursor blinked. His thumb hovered over the send button. A single tap, and it would be out in the world. No longer a thought he could swallow back. Or he could close the app, set the phone down, leave the past where it belonged. His breath came slow, steady, but his chest felt tight. The screen stayed lit. Waiting,